what is causing what causes memory usage? One of the things that that PageSpeed and YSlow talk about is Gzipping. And Gzipping, yes, definitely do it. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying that usually we think that's the solution. You gzip something, it gets tiny, goes over the airwaves. It was tiny, yay! This is what happens when it gets onto your device. It goes back, it gets expanded. It's the exact original size that it was before you gzipped it, right? And this is the amount of memory that is being used up. So you had this huge image that was, 40K. You gzipped it down to 12K, and you deflated it back to can't remember what number I used 5 minutes ago because I'm losing it. I don't wake up this early. I don't have an alarm clock at home, and I naturally wake up at about 9:15. So I woke up 15 minutes ago. So rendered media are still the same size as they were originally before you gzipped it. So what you need to do is you need to reduce the file size, and also this image right here, I'm going to put my phone right in front of my computer, and you're all going to see. I always do that. I'm like, yeah, you guys can't see anything. That image is bigger than this phone, right there on my screen. I don't need to send that image to this device in that size, because that is too big for this device. Yes, for the high DPI, that would probably be about right, because you have to think of it, it's going to be 1/4 the size when it's rendered. So reduce the image size. So we have tools to reduce file size, and we have tools to reduce image size. This is the one that I use. It's free, so it's not like they're paying me or I'm not making any money, and I really don't know how they make money. But you can download this at PNG Mini, and it is called Image Alpha. And I took this image, the original PNG, and the original PNG was 17,448, and I dropped it. I opened it in this application. By default, it saved me 64% of the file size. What it does is basically takes the PNG and all the transparent. I actually have no clue how it works. I used to know how it works. Now I can't remember. But basically, great tool. It reduces the image size. So when you're going over the airwaves, it saves bandwidth. And when you're rendering it, it uses up less memory. The other thing is you actually want to send smaller images. So this is a tool, and it was purchased by Sencha. So it used to be called Tiny Source Mobi, and now it's Sencha.io. The original image that I used was of a kitten, because you have to use kittens. And so I don't actually, this is supposed to be a link. Let's see if it works. Why is it not working? Hold on 1 second. Apparently I have something over it. So let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Does everyone know what pointer events none does? So I have this div, for some reason, over that, and I couldn't click on it. So I put pointer events none on that div, or whatever it was that I just put that on. So pointer events : none. It makes any element not clickable. So just like it's as if it was transparent and your mouse just goes right through it. So if you're going to start doing animations and you have like snowflakes, don't ever put snowflakes on your website. But let's say you do put snowflakes on your website. There's a snowflake and they can't hit the thing behind the snowflake because they have to wait. Just put pointer events none on all your animation that you don't want people clicking on, and that way they can still click whatever's behind it. Okay, so now I can click things behind it, and I can open this in a new tab, and we can see kittens. Apparently we can't. I want kittens! Okay, everyone else clicked on it at the same time. So, there we go. There's a kitten. A really slow kitten. So that was the original file that I used. And the reason that it's giving me such a huge image is because Sencha knows that I'm on a desktop. So instead, I'm going to go over here. First, I'm going to grab this. No. I'm going to find the page that I was on. There we are. I'm going to grab this, my little kitten JPEG, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to change my user agent to the iPod Touch, which is tiny. And then I'm going to wait for Adobe to load. I don't want to wait for Adobe to load. Don't you love when you do live presentations and everything goes really, really slow? Stop downloading whatever you're downloading. Okay, well, you're just going to have to believe me because I'm not going to waste any more time on it. But the original file that you saw me trying to download was 724 kilobytes. That was huge. And there's no way that that cat, if I can get to it again, this cat, I don't need to send such a big image. That's how big the image is to this phone. Useless, right? Waste of bandwidth, waste of memory. Any image that is bigger than 1024 on your mobile device will get tiled in memory. So you definitely want to be reducing file sizes. So originally the image was 724. When I sent it to my iPad, Sencha said, hey, this is an iPad, and it sent a smaller image that was 76 kilobytes. And for my iPod, it was 320. So this is kind of all well and good if Sencha actually knows what device you have, because what happens is Sencha is actually not testing width and height of your screen. It is doing everything on user agent. Let me see if I'm back to here and if we can actually, yeah, we can. So develop user agent, iPod Touch. There we go. So there's the cat. It doesn't know how big my screen is. It just knows that I switch my user agent to iPod. If I do iPad, I'll get a bigger image. And if I do just normal. So do you guys know how to do a user agent switcher? Okay, I see mostly nodding. I don't see anyone going, oh, I don't know what that is. This is not the right tool. This is not, don't use this for QA, basically. Use this as, all it does is switch your user agent. It doesn't tell your browser, the server anything. Other thing I do is I go like this, and I'm like, how does it look? And this is what I do for testing, like when I'm first developing. And another thing I do is I put a media query, and I say if media, like body, if media query greater than 600, the width is greater than 600, make the body 320 pixels. It's a media query that I pull out before I go into production, but it helps me keep it at 320 pixels, so I see approximately what my environment would be like without having to do user agent switching incessantly. So let's go back to our talk. So that's this. This is a tool. You can change your user agent and click on these links after you apparently do a pointer events none. So another thing that resolved a lot of issue is CSS masking. And masking is actually not part of the CSS spec. I don't know if it ever will be. It is a WebKit only feature. The last time I checked, that could have changed last week, who knows. But this was an issue that I encountered. I had this huge tape deck, and the tape deck moved like this. I animated the tape deck. And it had to be a transparent PNG because the bottom, has anyone ever seen like those old tape decks that had the little handle? And you had to see the wood grain through the handle. So how do you do that? You can't use a GIF, a transparent GIF, because GIFs are hideously ugly. So we used a transparent PNG, and I didn't have the tape deck, so I just created this frame. And so the transparent PNG was 551 kilobytes. That is huge. So what I did instead is I created, wow, wrong background color, totally. You guys can't tell, but this is white. This is gray because it's transparent. And this is a transparent PNG. So here, this is a JPEG. It's white in the middle. And then I create this mask, and you can see a little bit on the edge that's not quite rectangular because this right here is not quite rectangular. And with CSS masking, what happens is you only see, the only part that's opaque is the part that's masked. So we have more kittens. And here's another code labs that you guys can do later on, because we'll hopefully get to it. But masking example, open in a new tab. Oh, I opened it in a new tab. Okay. I want kittens. Oh, I need the solution. Where's the solution? You know where the solution is? Oh, there it is. There's my solution. So we have kittens. So what happens is, I have, okay, so this is using a large PNG, right? Can you guys see that? Yeah, you can. So this PNG is huge. Let's actually open the code lab. I'm going to open the code lab on this one. No, I don't want to close that. I almost closed out my entire presentation. Okay. So we download the code lab. And the code lab is going to take a minute to download because it has this huge PNG in it. So I'm going to do it locally. A new. One second, sorry about this. Presentations, that's under P. I didn't realize that it was going to be so slow, the internet. I probably should have. Mobile perf. And then we go to mask. Okay. So I'm going to open up this folder, and I'm going to show you it this way. So here is my PNG at 136 kilobytes. Here is, and you can barely see this, but here's my the JPEG. Here, if we do this. I know there's a way to increase the size, but okay. So that's what the image looks like. That's what the PNG looks like. That's what the JPEGs looks like. The only difference is, in the JPEG, the middle is white, right? In the PNG, it's transparent. In this mask right here, which is a tiny PNG file, it's gray in the middle. Because this part's, no, that's not what I wanted to open. I want to open this. There we go. That is the mask. That is a tiny 4 kilobyte file, I think. Let's just double check. Nope, even smaller, 282 bytes. That is a tiny file. So if you add this PNG and this JPEG, you have 21.2 kilobytes, right? Versus 136 kilobytes. So back to here. And back to here. So what we're doing in this example is we are taking that huge PNG and saying, forget it. I don't want to download 200 and whatever kilobytes. I'm going to instead download this JPEG with a fully opaque center, and then I'm going to download this tiny little mask of what I actually want to be opaque. And so these kittens are being seen through the background. And just to prove that they're being seen through the background, if we click on this, do that. That's what it originally showed. This is putting the PNG on top of it, which is slow. And the solution is right here. No. The solution is changing this. Oops. Shoot. Edit as HTML. Call that solution. reloads it, and there it is. So it looks the exact same, except for here, you see it says background image and WebKit mask, and no, you cannot see that because you guys are far away from me. There. Background image, WebKit mask. So I just saved 200 kilobytes by doing that. Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about CSS here, right? Is CSS a solution? CSS, we get rounded corners. Much better than wasting the time developing. How many people spend at least like a year of their life developing little circles? I mean, IE 6 and 7, like they're the best browsers ever because they've kept us employed. But at this point, I don't want that job anymore. So rounded corners, box shadows, text shadows, these are all great features. Gradients and media queries. And let me just show you a media query. Take this deck, for example. There's a media query on this deck. When it goes into portrait mode, oops. Goes into portrait mode, it turns red. When it gets to be the size of a mobile device, it turns green. Useless use of media queries, but it's just to show you, like, use media queries. When we're talking about sending images down the path, smaller, right? When we're talking about this is a tool for doing it. But if you use media queries and you say, if this browser is bigger than 640, send this image. If it's smaller than 320, use that image. If it's in between the two, use this image. You don't have to make an image for every single device because, you know, like the Galaxy S is like 10 pixels smaller than this, and the Galaxy 2S is like 40 pixels bigger or something ridiculous like that. You don't need to match every single size, but give it an approximate size. You know, go down 50%. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about web performance. Okay, so benefits of CSS are fewer HTTP requests, definitely. It's easy to update. You don't have to make those little corners anymore. You can scale. We were just talking about media queries. You can transition them. You can animate them. Animate is the next word. And with you know, the ability to do, like that phone that I showed you, where we're using mask, I actually used a generated content. And so I only had one DOM node. It was one div for that page. So fewer DOM nodes, which is way cheaper to repaint and reflow. But there are some CSS features that can totally ruin your web application. And this is actually my main skill. People don't necessarily know this about me, and I guess it's not a secret anymore since I'm saying it on videotape. Hello. I am a master at breaking the web and crashing browsers. And so a lot of this that we've talked about today is teaching you how not to do what I do. So basically learn from my mistakes so that you can save years of your life and stop yourself from going bald or going gray. So these are a few things that you might not think about, but that lead to poor performance in some cases. I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying use them wisely. So enlarged fonts, box shadow, especially inset, text indent can do something that you didn't think about. Gradients, background size cover, non-rendered content. By non-rendered content, if you look at this deck right here, right now, I shrank it down. So you see there's 3 slides, right? If you were on a mobile device, there might just be, you know, depending on what your aspect ratio is, there might just be one with a teeny bit on the edges, or maybe nothing on the edges. So if my browser was this size, right? This whole slide over here and this whole slide over here, although they're not seen, they're still rendered. So you're thinking they're not rendered, especially if you go down to the color red. Or actually, you don't even have to get to red. Right there, you only see one slide. But I have all that other stuff stored in memory. I don't have the whole slide deck stored in memory, but I definitely do have 3 to 5 slides. I can't remember how I did the slide deck. So I have 3 to 5 slides in memory. So when you're thinking about what is on your mobile device, just because you did like a a meta viewport, a viewport meta that said, don't allow zooming, this is 320, et cetera, that actually doesn't have, that just changes what the person's viewport looks like. It doesn't actually have any impact whatsoever on what's rendered. So realize that stuff is being rendered that's out of your viewport, and that is using up memory. So manage that as well. So back to our deck, and let's just go back into presentation mode so we can get a little bit bigger. This one. Okay, so fonts. No one ever thinks fonts are going to be an issue. They think it's an issue because you have to download this whole font set. And yet, you have this whole font set in memory. So definitely, who here has heard of Font Squirrel? Okay, go to Font Squirrel, never upload an image, a font file, like if you need to do a font face, without going to Image Squirrel and reducing your font set to what you need. Because like on my website, I have the word Standardista, it's at an angle, it's in a cool font, and I'm using actual fonts. But Standardista is not a word. It doesn't exist in any language. There is a guy in Italy, in southern Italy, named Standardista, but that's about it. It's this made-up word. So it's not like it's going to be translated into Greek, right, or Russian. I don't need multiple character sets. I need an S, a T, an A, an N, etc., and that's it. So why would I send every single number, capital letter, lowercase letter, Cyrillic characters, I'm making stuff up. I don't need to. So Font Squirrel, when you, I wasn't planning on talking about Font Squirrel, so it's not my deck, but Font Squirrel under Expert allows you to actually identify what font characters you want to include. So if you have like a game, an app that only uses numbers, download 0 through 9, and that's it. Don't upload the entire font face. But what I actually want to talk about here is this is an issue that you will never find. It will never crash your browser because it's never going to be a big enough issue. But it is going to make your, it's just something you need to store in the back of your head that goes, oh, I'm using up more memory than I thought, which is small fonts. This font right here is your biggest issue, not this one. And why is this one your biggest issue? Because I want these, like these two fonts, to look about this size. I want them to be about 48 pixels. To make this font look like it's 48 pixels, I have to increase it to 86 pixels. To make this font look like it's 48 pixels, I probably can bring it down to 24. So that means that for the one below, down here, yeah, you can see where I'm pointing, because I'm pointing at my computer, but it's showing up there, which is cool. To make it that big, I'm actually drawing 86 pixels worth of height. If I was using this font, I'm actually drawing 24 pixels worth of height, right? So it's in memory, it's saving up, it's basically doing an 86 pixel image versus a 24 or 48. So so it's never going to completely bite you in the tushy, like it's never going to crash your browser, but it's just something in the back of your mind. You have to think, oh, I probably shouldn't do my entire website in that font because it's using up a lot of memory. Another issue is shadows, and with this example right here, I actually crashed, it didn't crash, but I got the little spinny beach ball on my desktop, on my other laptop, which had 8 gigs. So you're kind of like, wow, how could this little image right here do that? So what I was doing is I was animating these two images, and basically I had 48 images and one was coming in. And so I always wanted to have one in the background just in case one didn't come in. So it was always two layers deep just in case one image didn't show. And then in case it didn't show at all, like both images failed, I had this permanent image in the background with an inset shadow of 46 pixels. So what was happening is when your browser is drawing images, it's actually drawing from the back to the front. So every time I animated, which was once a second, it drew this one, then it measured this. It figured out exactly what pixel to show because this is transparent, so the transparency is coming through, so it has to measure this pixel plus this gray at this opacity, what pixel should I show? And then it was, after it measured all of that, it was then putting this image on top and this image on top. So I was just trying to see these two move in and out. But it was using up all of my RAM to measure this semi-transparent shadow on top of something that was opaque. So this, you would never think that an inset shadow would bite you in the tushy. But this crashed because of the animation. So a few things to note. It's rendering from back to front, so you're actually measuring everything. So the smart thing to do was to just put this shadow permanently in this image, which I eventually figured out after I spent 6 hours debugging JavaScript. There's no JavaScript, there was no JavaScript making this thing run. It was purely animation. But I was sure I had an infinite loop, because what else makes your beach ball go? You totally cannot see this, but there's a line around here. So the old method of doing image replacement was to do a text indent of -999 ems. And if you remember about my discussion as to what is rendered on the page, you might not see it, but it's still being rendered. When you put your text out here, even though it'll never show, it's as if it was this slide here. It's still rendering it. So the viewport is just this, but it's rendering all of that in memory, just in case you move it over. So this is not going to crash your browser like the one before it did, but you're using up a lot of memory because you are actually storing a web page and everything you have, this big. You have this huge file. So instead, just like use CSS clip or any other type of image replacement, put your text up here. Put your text, if you do like a text indent, like your on mobile this works. It doesn't work necessarily on desktop. But if you have like your logo is 400 pixels wide, that's it, crazy. Your logo is 200 pixels wide. You do a text indent of 205 pixels, and you do an overflow hidden. And so it puts the text over here, and you're never going to see it. And that works across all mobile browsers, and you're good as gold. So just a little trick. Gradients. When mobile browsers are running out of memory, image memory, they sometimes don't crash. They just sometimes give you gray lines. Or like they'll underline your text and you'll think there's something wrong with your text when it's actually running out of memory on like an image, but it's what's being displayed is a problem with text. This is actually what's drawn when you draw a radial gradius. All I wanted was this little curve right here in my mobile phone. And so like that is probably big enough. That is probably out to about here, right? Proportionally, of course, it's not that big, but let's say it was on this phone, right, the curve's here, it would be a circle like this big. That's bigger right there than 1024. It's getting tiled in memory. It is using up memory. So I'm not saying don't use radial gradients ever. I'm saying if you're going to use a radial gradient, use a tiny one. Linear gradients are fine because they draw a line and they repeat it. Radial gradients can use up a huge amount of CPU. So that is definitely a gotcha. And then background size. Background size becomes so vitally important. Probably no one knows, a lot of people have never used it. But if you're doing mobile and you're wanting to target the iPhone 4 or any Retina display, you're basically giving it an image that's like this big and saying fit into something that's, it's a box like this, fit into something 1/4 the size. You use background size for that. And there's a few different values. Like here we have another kitten, because you have to have kittens. And this is 200 pixels by 200 pixels. I can change the background size to this and distort it. Oh, that's actually really cute. I can cover the whole area. I can contain the image, or I can just do, again, auto. Cover is actually what will bite you in the tushy. Because it's measuring the image every time you switch the sides. Like anytime you do anything animated in any way, it's remeasuring it to make sure that it's covering the whole box. So that's just kind of like a gotcha to keep in the back of your head. I'm not saying don't use contain. But I had an image one time, this bit me in the tushy. I had a PNG that was 320 pixels, and I was putting it into a 320 pixel box, and I was saying contain. I didn't need contain. It was going to be contained anyway. And And since it was a PNG, it was such, I was prototyping, so it wouldn't have been anything I would have put in production. But it was, why was I using 32-bit PNGs on a mobile device? I have no clue, but I was, and Contain basically made striping. So you might not, you basically have to do stupid case scenarios like I did and put a 32-bit PNG on a mobile device to discover these. But because I do stupid things, I can then warn you about them when you're not going to do something as stupid as I did, but you actually need to know that Contain is using up memory. So you definitely use it because you need it, but just realize it does not come for free. Another thing that people have been doing, and I am guilty of it myself, is using Transform Translate 3D. Translate Z rather, with a value of 0. It's kind of like the Zoom 1 of IE. You just stick it on everything and it makes everything work better. But you never wanted to put Zoom 1 on everything because it actually, if you put it on one or two things when you need it, great. It made IE work better. If you put it, did a star Zoom 1, your IE would crash. Not that it's not going to crash for other reasons anyway, but that's just to help it push it along. So Translate Z will take anything that's in your anything that's being rendered on your CPU and put it onto your it hardware accelerates it. So it's like you think it's a panacea. And for your one or two elements, definitely use it. It is a panacea. It makes everything work great. But what it does is it actually becomes a composited image, and it's 4 times the size in memory. So it's on your GPU, but it's using battery. It's using up memory. Take advantage of it, but don't abuse it. Think of it as caffeine, maybe. Maybe not as crack, because crack you never want to use in the first place. But caffeine, yeah, you can have 3 cups of coffee, but you don't want to have a cup of coffee for every single element on your page, right? Okay, images. This is one of those things I didn't know how to show it, so I'm just going to read it to you. Images. You want to use images as much as possible by creating background images instead of foreground images. Because what happens is when you have a background image, when you have a foreground image, the data is sent just as is. It's like we have these bytes, I'm just going to send it to be rendered. Whereas when you have a background image, it actually processes it first, and it's more performant. So you can read this whole thing, or you can just realize that foreground images use up more memory. That's the summary of that, but feel free to read. I couldn't find an article on this, so I'm going to, I know that the guy from Flickr, Scott, what's this guy from Flickr's name? The really awesome dude from Flickr who was working on mobile just wrote an article that came out yesterday. About this very issue, so I need to read it and then update it. And these slides, right now, if you came in late, wow, I'm telling you really late, but estelle.github.com/mobileperf. These slides are always going to be up, forever, but they're going to be updated a little bit, and one of the updated features I'll probably link to that article on that page right there. Okay, last topic, responsive UI. Yay, responsive UI. So, mobile devices. On desktop, we had a click event. You clicked, and it was all well and good. On mobile devices, you have the tap and the double tap. And because you have the double tap, the mobile device has it depends on the phone, but the average is a 300 millisecond delay. I have a thing down here that shows me what slide I'm on. It's on slide number 3 right now. Useless. It says perceived latency. I don't even know what that means. I don't even think that's one of my slides. Oh. Maybe it's my other window. Okay. So touch events, 300 millisecond delay. If you go to any of Steve Sauter's talks, you know that anything over 200 seconds is like this terrible, awful lag that people don't want to deal with. So unlike best practices, where we say you really shouldn't usurp, hijack events, you want to hijack mobile touch events. you want to just say, hey, on first touch, this happened, let me know, and take it from there, because you don't want to have to wait the 300 milliseconds. I mean, obviously, this is not a rule. What I'm saying is, sometimes you might have something in your app where a double tap makes sense, but if you have a tap that someone's always going to be tapping on a button, and they're going to only tap once, there's no reason to tap twice, just say right away, like hijack that event and say, co-opt it, co-opt the touch event with JavaScript and say on the first touch, this is what you should do. Another thing is that these tapping events, when your page, like you basically sent the HTTP request and you're getting a file back, but your page is still there, and so the person's still tapping on it, but the page really isn't there, it's just in this la la land. It can happen that there's touch events, because if the person's going like this because it's not reacting, because you didn't tell it that you heard it, heard the user, some of those events, touch events, might not be forgotten. So it might actually be implemented on your next page. So it's really important to actually tell the user that, oh, here it is. I gotcha. So accept the user input. First of all, you accept it, and then you provide feedback and say, I heard you, stop clicking. If it's going to take a long time, entertain them. Give them a little bouncing ball. I don't care what you do. Don't give them a spinner. The spinner's boring. The spinner makes it seem like, hey, just a spinner makes it seem like you're waiting, because too many people use a spinner when nothing's happening. I prefer to give a little bit more animation. A bouncing ball or something like that, it's kind of like, hey, we know this is supposed to take a long time. It's not actually that we're slow. It's like this is a slow process. Provide that feedback if it's going to take a long time, and then update the UI when you have the information. So I told you I would talk about Repaint and Reflow. So Repaint, on your desktop, really isn't something to worry too much about, but it is on your mobile device. And it's not always. Repaint is supposed to be one of those things that's cheap, it's almost free. And it is, unless it is repainting stuff with transparency. So I'm not saying don't use transparency. I'm just saying use transparency wisely, because when you are repainting, it has to measure all the pixels and see what pixel it's you. Oh, I don't need it.
You don't need the
No.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm happy. We don't need the internet anymore. Okay. I'm doing a presentation with no internet. Yeah, that's kind of funny at a tech conference. Okay, so Repaint. When visibility changes, when colors change, when something transforms, when you're actually taking something and transforming it, it looks like it's moving, but it's only repainting that div, and if it's moving it across, kind of like in the third dimension, it's not in the original layer. So that's cheap. Changing out background images is cheap. Transparency is fairly cheap when you're making something more or less transparent. It's not as much as a reflow, and I'll say what a reflow is in a minute. But just realize that if you're repainting over and over and over again, and you're measuring pixels, yeah, at some point it's no longer going to be performant. And I'm not saying don't repaint your pages, don't use transparency. I'm saying if you're going to animate something incessantly, just realize that you are using up CPU. Okay, Reflow uses up tons of CPU. When you ask with JavaScript and you say, hey, how tall is my div? Looks like it's 320 pixels. I'm lazy. I would say, it looks like it's 320 because that's the size of your page. But JavaScript wants to be exact. So it's going to go in and it's going to measure it. So when you say, hey, how big is something with JavaScript, it takes every single DOM node that you have and remeasures it and basically reflows the page. Actually, it does reflow the page. And that becomes more and more expensive the more DOM nodes you have. So what causes a reflow? When you flip your phone from here to here, you're reflowing it because you're going from orientation, landscape to portrait. And that's normal. And you shouldn't stop that from happening. But when you add or remove or update a DOM node, it reflows the whole page. When you change something from display block to display none, it has to remeasure where everything after it comes from lands, and then oftentimes it will remeasure every single DOM node. And resizing, zooming, and scrolling on the desktop, but not so much on the mobile device, because on the mobile device, you're actually looking through a viewport. Your web page is that big, and your mobile device is basically going like this around the page. So resizing and moving it, not necessarily on a mobile will cause a reflow, but it will on the desktop. So how can you help minimize the negative effects of a reflow? You can minimize the number of nodes, because every single node needs to be measured for every, this should say reflow. It should not, this is a typo. When you ask the DOM for an element, cache it. And minimize DOM manipulations. You want to batch them. So all of your how big is this should go first, and all of your let's add this to the DOM should go at the end. So you first get all your measurements, then you do all your JS magic, and then you push everything at the end. Because that way it will only reflow twice. And I have... There are tons of more notes on that page, and they're not showing up. Am I on the right deck? Okay, who knows? Oh, probably because I did it last minute and I haven't pushed it to GitHub yet. Okay. So one thing I was saying is minimize the number of nodes. And this is just kind of an example. So this is a game of Tetris, and I pulled this picture off the web. And I don't know where, but this person scored 3.4 million. That's 666 lines. Now, that's a lot of boxes, right? Let's say each box is a div. Each div, because this is moving, when this row disappears, the whole thing is reflowed, right? So you could use 3,454,918 divs, or you could use 20 by 12, or whatever this grid is. And that's what you want to do. You want to pool your elements and your objects, and you want to reuse them. And then instead of throwing them away at the end, you just put them back at the top. Netflix did a good job of this, but there was a great example that Matt Seeley used to have, but Netflix has since changed their UI. So I need to come up with a better example. But why is this important? How did I break the web with this? I did a game of concentration that was kind of Tetris-y. Like you would flip cards and you had to match them before the whole thing got full. And I threw away my nodes when I was done with them. Every time I dropped a new card in, it was a new node. And after you started scoring about 1,800, the game was it was supposed to get faster, but it was getting slower. And that was just so incredibly stupid. Like, why did I have 1,800 nodes when I could have had, or that was actually 3,600 nodes, that I was measuring every single time it was repainting, instead of just using the same node and bringing it back to the top. So pool and reuse instead of destroying. So a few other tips. You want to test in real environments. A simulator is not an emulator. This has 4 gigs. This has 768, right? On my when I have the little iPhone or the Android emulator open, I'm not capping my memory. I'm allocating everything I have to it. That's not a real experience. Also, I still don't have many apps on this device, but I have a lot of apps on my iPod. Full of apps. Those apps are kind of open. Some of them are running in the background. People are like, no, they don't really run in the background. They're just paused. It's like, no, there's notifications. They're still, doing requests incessantly. So when you're using your emulator, you're giving it 4 to 8 gigs of RAM, and you don't have any apps on it. So realize you need to cap your memory, and you need to have other apps open. You want to test on multiple devices, and right now I'm on the Velocity Wi-Fi. That is why the winery could work. So they could communicate because they're on the same one. Test your devices using AT&T's 3G network. It's not going to work, right? I don't even get, if I want to get calls on this device, I have to stand, there's 2 spots on, where I live where I can get it either on the patio in the southeastern corner or at the edge of my driveway right by the street. When people are on the bus, hopefully they have better reception. Hopefully they don't have AT&T. But test in real environments, test on the mobile network. Use tools, even basic ones. My first tool that I have when I'm developing mobile web apps is I have the activity monitor open. When I see a spike there, I know that my web application, I don't need to do all of my other testing. I know right away that I'm screwing things up. When you use when you use CSS transforms, scale down, not up. This has nothing to do with performance. It's just, it looks better. Use average font sizes. Take advantage of native storage, local storage that we taught you. And don't disable zoom. I wear granny glasses. I'm very proud of my granny glasses. The thing I do the most on mobile devices is that, so I can see. And every time I try to open the inspector, I actually increase the font size because that action to me now is actually more common than opening up the inspector, which I'm in all day. So don't disable zoom except for games. Yeah, if flicking like this is going to, if going like that is part of your game, it's going to be a terrible user experience. It makes sense to disable zoom on games, but if you're doing the Southwest Airlines mobile web application and the person can't read what time the flight comes in, it's a useless application. There's no reason to disable it just because it looks prettier. That is my lecture part. Conclusion. Follow the performance recommendations of that Steve Cyrus gives you with Google Speed and YSlow. Realize that there's issues of latency, so you want to minimize the number of requests. Always manage memory. This is memory and battery should, when you're developing on this. You're not managing memory, you're not managing battery. It's something that you have to consciously do. So I urge you to please, if you're going to take anything out of this, you might not know how to do a gradient, you might not know how to do a mask, but what I want you to take out of it is just remember your users aren't monitoring their battery usage. They don't realize that your web app that they got to from Google is going to completely suck their battery. That's your job. Use CSS judiciously. Use it for everything, but just realize that there's some gotchas. Use JS minimally. Definitely not for animation. And definitely, don't add a framework if you're not going to use 99% of that framework. Use Vanilla.js. Vanilla.js is the best library. Anyone know what Vanilla.js is? It's an opening script tag and a closing script tag. Until someone comes out with the Vanilla.js library, which probably someone has already done. Batch query, query and manipulate. First query, do all your logic, and then put back into the DOM at the end with one fell swoop. Reuse a DOM and always keep mobile in mind. And remember, your users may not be tethered, and their memory may be very limited. And that's all I have in terms of presenting to you. The slides, again, are here. This book here, when it finally comes out, started writing it 2.5 years. Oh, no, it's this book right here. When it finally comes out, hopefully in October or November, I basically wrote it 2 years ago, and then now I need to rewrite it because it's too old. We'll have all of this information in there, but the deck is always here. And this is the best way to contact me is Twitter, and please follow me because I'm a Twitter whore. And so if you have any questions, that's it for my part of the presentation.